start now, even if you're starting imperfectly. Your perspective matters more than you think, and either that be what you do, how old you are, where you're from, you're able to leverage that in some sort of way to create a difference.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the SparkBuddies Podcast. I'm your host, Esther. Today, I will be speaking with Ethan, who will share his entrepreneurial journey with us. We actually met during LaunchX this summer. So Ethan, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself? For example, how old you are, where you live, and what you find interesting about entrepreneurship.
Yeah, so thanks for having me. I'm Ethan. I'm 15, actually 16 in like 2 days, but I'm a high school founder and researcher where basically I turn ideas into systems. I think my intersection is of AI and entrepreneurship. I think my motto for people when I'm working with startup founders is that ideas are ubiquitous, but your perspective isn't. And you'll hear me say this over and over again, but I truly believe it. I like to build stuff that feels a bit too early, either that be accelerators, data sets, models, and making them available from students to professionals. And I'd like to say I'll work on the intersection of chaos and precision.
So it's great to have you here today, and I'm really interested in what you're going to present to us. So could you tell us, first of all, the name of your business? And for somebody hearing about Nova for the first time, what is it about?
Yeah. So what is Nova? Question I answer at least 10 times a day. But Nova is a high school and college focused startup accelerator. And what is a startup accelerator, first of all? Startup accelerators help turn ideas into real products. It's basically a combination between mentorship, workshops, and a community to help you turn your idea, your research, your initial project into a fully fledged startup to grow that way. Basically, I think it's a best crash course in life skills. You learn how to take initiative, how to fail, and how to be a leader. And I think our tagline really is you learn by building, you fail by design, and you'll grow on purpose.
So what do you offer? Do you offer like courses, or is it one-on-one mentorships?
All of the startups that we work through kind of get funneled into sort of one program, and it's what we term as the Nova roadmap, so to speak. And it's a roadmap that I developed, I want to say 2 years ago at this point, with a couple of my friends, product managers and engineers and other, you know, entrepreneurs. I was working with a few PMs from like Meta and from Google, for example, to how to get a marketable product, taking what I've learned, speaking from them and their suggestions on building a set roadmap, as well as with VCs. And so when people go through the roadmap, they'll take a phase, learn what they need to do. They'll go through trial and error, obviously, as through the startup process. And then I'll work with them one-on-one to see where we need to take from here and how to best grow. And then they also get access into VC networks, raising capital, and all of that stuff as well. So it's definitely a multi-stage process that a lot of students and entrepreneurs go through.
I'd love to deep a little bit deeper into that. So for example, how long does a roadmap last?
Yeah, and I think this is a sort of a deviating point from, typical launch pads like LaunchX or a Y Combinator, Techstars, Speedrun. I think because we start off with a 6-month set, framework that helps you take from the beginning of where you are starting from. We work with people with just their research ideas, to people who are already having 10K in monthly revenue and trying to grow even larger from there. From a 6-month path, they get to work with just advancing one step further, not necessarily reaching a specific goal, but just making sure they make progress, which is all that's really needed in the startup world. But I think what differentiates us, and some other startup communities have it too, but it's a continuous process. And so startups that go through Nova stay in Nova, and they work with other members who come in as well.
And regarding the master classes, for example, because you're also almost 16, how do you make yourself more credible? And do you deliver the master classes? And why do people listen to you and believe you?
Yeah, I think this is a good question. Honestly, I sometimes wonder why people listen to me. But I think there's three main ways of showing credibility, I guess, especially as a young person working with a lot of people who are, 4 times my age. Uh, I remember I was actually at the UN, I think like a week or two ago. I was speaking with a bunch of the people who worked there, getting some people to come to the demo days for our next cohort that's coming up. And I think our conversation was talking about the master classes. And so I deliver occasional master classes. I think getting industry professionals and obvious people who have worked with that before to talk about it ad nauseum definitely helps. And then from there, when they've already taken the lessons that people already know and resonate and connect with these, experts in their field, and then packaging it in a different way into our own roadmap, which is Nova, I think makes it a lot more credible, where you take, ideas and substances that people that you trust already work with and, building it towards something else definitely helps increase their credibility.
Is it online or in person? How do you get access to all these resources?
A new project that actually I've been talking about, so this will be the first time it goes online. But I'm working with a special high school only program, which just takes a lot of high school students who have either published research, patents on products, or passion projects that built and have already shown to be different from everything else. The college passion project, right? And that stuff is in person at a locations in we're based in New York City, so either there. But over the last couple of last year or so, Nova has been primarily online, and so we've been running cohorts virtually. So that is both a positive and a negative. I mean, positive, we can get founders. We work with founders from Singapore. We work from founders from San Francisco. We work from founders from Toronto. Um, Culminating them all into one environment definitely helps, but also being physically at a location definitely helps a lot, especially as a startup. So definitely are looking forward to expanding on that aspect.
So now let's dig a little bit deeper into the background. What first gave you the idea to create Nova?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think initially it was sort of I don't know how you put it, a eureka moment, right? I've been working, I guess, a couple years ago, I started working in dev. And as a junior software engineer at a lot of different startups and labs, I've met a bunch of other high school students who've had these like really insane ideas. Um, and they definitely had the skills to do it, right? They were doing research at Stanford. They were building these huge AI projects that honestly some undergrad or grad students couldn't do. But there wasn't a way to, be an outlet other than, publishing a research paper and getting a professor to sign off on it. So back then I wasn't able to do anything about it, but now, especially as my own startup expertise has, grown a little bit and I've gotten more exposure, I'm now able to create a place to get these kids with tons of ideas, but not enough infrastructure to actually build something and, not just talk about it. I've watched so many founders drop off after really good pitches, because of a lack of mentorship, burnout, chaos. Maybe they didn't meet their, performance indicators, didn't meet their revenue goals. And I think just finding a single platform / infrastructure to streamline all of that is definitely a way to protect it and to create accessibility so, these startup flames don't die out.
That's great, especially as teenagers, we have more trouble building our credibility. So it can be really hard. And I think Nova's a great resource for young founders. And what were the toughest challenges earlier when getting Nova started?
Ooh, toughest challenges. I think the entire thing was a challenge. I think initially getting some early adoption into Nova was difficult because it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You need credibility via startups that do well, but you also need to have startups to do well to get startups that don't do well to go in. And, that loop, you need something to kickstart it. And think, as with any startup, getting that first user into it is probably the most difficult thing you'll ever do. And then from there, I think a more difficulty too is, setting up the structure itself. The roadmap was pretty difficult to create effectively because not all startups are the same, and if you put a equation to mass produce startups, that doesn't really work out. And I think being able to find that right distinction between standardized roadmap and flexibility, which a lot of our PMs and our mentors help with, definitely add to the experience in the cohort. And I think that was a difficulty initially to, find that balance.
I feel like Nova has come a long way. So right now, how many startups are in your program?
Yeah, I th- hmm, actually I haven't done a count in a while. So
Like approximately, would you say there's a lot, or are you still just getting
so
started?
we've been online for like 2 years and 6 months now. Uh, so we've been around for a little bit. Right now, I think there's 10 startups in the cohorts. Two that are still ongoing, 8 alumni. Some have already graduated and moved on to, other projects. Some of them have exited privately. And yeah, I believe around 10 or so right now as of November 2nd. We're doing another cohort soon. That's why I don't want to give a number yet with the total.
That's great. Do you have to pay for Nova, or how do you make money off of it
Yeah,
if you do?
making money off this, I think, is a very unique challenge because we're not necessarily an investment fund of sorts. I mean, there's a few ways we gain revenue. I mean, some of the master classes, I know some of the people do charge and we get a small commission off that. But I think primarily when startups do well, we do well. So when a startup goes to exit or they raise a round through a VC, sometimes we get a little bit of a check from that, almost as like a scout. Or if we whatchamacallit, if a startup goes through a small business acquisition and they make a money, maybe we'll get like a 2% cut out of that. And that definitely helps. But since the entire thing is not, capital heavy, we're able to operate without, charging a lot. And under the big nonprofits and conglomerates, LLCs established, we allow other projects to fund Nova as well. So we're not burning a lot of capital in the first place. So yeah.
Okay. So if it's not, if you don't really need much capital to get Nova going, what tools did you use to build Nova? Is there any free platforms?
Nova has a website. I mean, it's in maintenance right now. It'll be up soon. By the time this recording's up, the website will be back up. Uh, I gotten we've
Mm.
got devs to build that out initially because we had some initial funding that we were able to get a dev team. I'm privileged to work with, as of now, 10 other members on the Nova team who build the websites, maintain the frameworks, and do all of those things. But I think main tools we build with a dev stack of we use AWS, we use what do we use? We use React for the websites, and Figma to design. I mean, on the operational side, we use Notion a lot for like organizing ideas, and we encourage startups who are with our program to use that as well. We use Airtable. Canva and Figma are obvious givens, and Google Drive, the G Suite, is pretty useful as well. I know it's used academically, but in this context, it's great, especially if you don't want to pay for a Microsoft subscription.
I've heard of all those apps, and they definitely have helped a lot, especially Notion. And do you also have a community platform for young founders like Slack or Discord where they can talk to each
Yeah,
other?
so initially, actually, we had our own platform that our engineers built, but getting people to sign up and effectively check that platform daily was a struggle. So I believe as of when? As of like August of last year, 2024, we discontinued that in lieu for Discord. So we have a private Discord community with all of the startups and founders and relevant VCs to be able to interact and build together.
Do you promote Nova through social media? And if so, what
Yeah, I
platforms?
think this is a very interesting thing. We initially, as I was talking to my marketing team, I think a couple weeks ago, actually, it's been a long story, but we haven't used too much social media to promote it. And I think this entire thing falls back to our core strategy. I think when you go to get advice for, young founders building startups, the first thing they do is you need to market, market, market. And that is important. But social media isn't always the best place to do it. I mean, especially you have to think about who your target audience is. For us, Nova, we look for very cracked kids, people who have done very well in their fields and being able to, capitalize that. Those type of kids aren't necessarily going to be on your Twitter, your Instagram, your TikTok, those type of things. What we have is for, marketing and stuff, we have people that go to these Olympiads. We have people who, go to these top high schools in the United States and, look and really gauge to see who is that top 1% who could build something different. And focusing our efforts that way has been more effective than, a general social media marketing platform. But again, it all depends on who your target user is and if that audience suits a social media campaign.
This is a very unique approach going straight to your audience. Most people nowadays I've heard use like TikTok, Instagram, all that. So it's a really smart approach. And you talked a lot about we. Who is we? Do you have a team? You talked about your developers, like who manages the finances, all
Yeah,
that.
honestly, I think this was more as a personal development over time. I mean, at my old startup slash, I guess it's a nonprofit now, but back a couple years ago, I used to manage a dev team of like 50 people, and so I think I learned right off the bat that managing a large team is quite a nightmare. It definitely has its perks, but definitely has more challenges than what it's worth. So we started off building Nova under a pretty lean team of 4 to 5. But as of today, I think at its largest, we had like 17 people working on it. And right now, I think it's down to like a handful, like seven or eight people, I think, right now, including, dev and operations. I still do most of the work myself just because it's very much of a personal brand focused company. And so being able to manage finances, uh, marketing and outreach all through one person is very easy to keep track of. And, doing things that don't scale at this level right now still works. So if it works, don't break it.
Now let's look more into Nova itself. When founders first join Nova, what support do you give them? What resources do you have aside from the courses?
Yeah. I think part of Nova, what we offer itself is half the roadmap, half the community. I think, especially for high schoolers, it's very hard, especially for capital intensive projects, to be able to get the capital that you need to build out some of your ideas, especially if you're a physical product. If you're a software company, yeah, we get some of those. Those you don't really need that much capital for, to be fair. But if you're building, like, I know I was working with a agricultural company, building some sort of like machine that they use to farm. They're still getting that patented, so I don't want to talk too much about that, but they needed to raise like $2 to $3 million to even get this off the ground and sell. And so between pre-orders, VC raises that they got through Nova, I think it really, really was the community that helped people meet other VCs, meet other angels, private, what's the word? I'm losing it. Private offices. And I think the community definitely helped them grow in that sense. But initially, going back to your question, we really spend a couple weeks to diagnose where they're at and what they actually need to do. I think that's the one thing that they do to avoid burnout is to work with purpose in a direction. And I think finding that direction is very important initially. And so we spend a good amount of energy on that.
Could you share a story of a young founder who came in with nothing but an idea and then you helped them build up to where they are now, if you have one?
Mm. Yeah, this is tricky to talk about because a lot of these have client confidentiality. Um,
Yeah.
so to preface what I'll talk about is that typically we target high school, college students who've already have something built in their field, either that be a, research paper published, a product built, or, a project that they have already. So the technical aspect of it is typically already developed, and we look to, make sure that is already somewhat completed before we even begin because, you can't sell nothing. I mean, if I had, let's say, theoretically, someone who come into the incubator with just an idea, I think the first thing that they would need to do is get someone to build it or build it themselves, their MVP. I think just a project that you could physically use can be able to help you actually grow your projects, either that be startup, nonprofit, or anything. Without a physical thing that people can actually use, it's very difficult to, grow, raise funds, market, um, any of that things of that sort. So I think definitely if we had a person who just came with an idea, we would tell them to, build it first and then work from there. Let's see, do people want it? Have people used it? What do they think about it? What's the avenues that we need to take strategically to be able to grow this from 0 to 1, from 1 to 100?
You talked about how they can get help before, but so how do should young founders think about getting team members? What's the approach? Because it can be really hard to find people as dedicated as you.
Yeah, I think there's a fine balance to be drawn. I mean, just going back earlier in the podcast, we talked about how managing large teams can be quite difficult, especially as there's a difference between a founder and a CEO. And I think you go to a lot of podcasts that talk about this, but you need to be able to act fast and swift as a startup, as a founder, that you don't necessarily have when you're trying to build strong structural systems like a CEO. And I think, especially for students, you would find the best co founders with people you actually know. I've had a lot of success just building with people that I've worked with before. So either that be former coworkers on a dev project that I was working with, or with people that used to go to my school. Stuff where you know personally their work ethic are people you synergize best with, and it doesn't feel like you're managing them, you feel like you're actually building with them. And I think being able to find that and finding people who, meet that criteria, even if they aren't as driven, you both empower each other to become better founders and better people, so to speak.
You said that you should know how to act fast and be swift with what you're doing. But that can be hard when, as a teenager, we have a lot going on. So, how would you say you balance school and entrepreneurship? And what is advice you would give to somebody to be able to keep that balance?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think hmm, you can't do both well at one time. I think a lot of people you see that drop out of school to do startups full time. I mean, you hear it about it all the time, right? But there's definitely a, rationale or reasoning behind why that happens. If your focus is really split on two different things at the same time, you're not going to do either well. I'm sure that's been said countless times over and over. But for those of you, such as like me, who aren't ready to, drop out of school to do this full time, I think the advice is very similar to what people do when they actually drop out. Why do they drop out? They drop out so they're able to focus on something completely. So to be able to balance your time, I would proportion your days to be, I will finish all of my school related, club related, academic related activities by 5 p.m. And then from 5 to 2 a.m., I'm working just on the startup, just working on one thing. So you almost get that sense of I'm working full time now in this startup. You have to be able to flick a switch and to be able to commit fully within something. And that in of itself is a skill, but it's definitely a useful skill to have.
I think it's great advice. 2 a.m. is you have to be really dedicated, but I think that people who are watching this podcast and who do want to learn about entrepreneurship have that dedication. And so even if the best ideas, even if you can't balance it and they start to get messy, how do you keep your clients, like people who work with Nova, motivated, and how do you keep them
Yeah.
going?
I can't remember who says this, but the number one way, I know someone told me this a while ago, the number one way to avoid burnout is to work in a direction. If you see yourself making progress toward a goal, you're not really going to feel, burnt out by it. And that's what I love working with video game designers because they do this so well. They're able to take a, a player and being able to have them accomplish micro goals to work up to a bigger goal. And I'm sure this has been said, dozens of times before, but it really works. I mean, to avoid burnout, set small micro goals for yourself that are able to be completed effectively. And then seeing how all of that plays towards your larger goal, you really won't get burnout if you're doing things off a checklist. I got this goal done. I got this goal done. I got my first 10 users. I got my first $200 in sales. I contacted and cold emailed my 20 VCs. I think the second part of this answer is to be able to only focus on factors that you can actually change. So focusing on stuff like success, like I got 1,000 users in 2 hours. Um, not necessarily is the best way to measure performance. I think that might get you burned out a little bit. But I think on things you can do yourselves, I finished this section of the code base today. I was able to talk to and send a invitation to these 20 potential clients today. And you can actually do something about it. Definitely is a way to avoid burnout than giving yourself goals that depend on what other people do and other people's reactions. And I think a combination of micro goals and goals that you can actually do something about is how to avoid burnout. But also, give yourself a break once in a while. I think definitely people, especially who listen to this podcast, will definitely need it.
That's great advice. What are some of the common mistakes that you see young founders make? And what's an advice you would give to help us prevent that?
Let's narrow it down to 3 mistakes. I think there's 3 main mistakes that founders, especially first-time founders and young founders, make. And a lot of more experienced founders, you'll see very much so avoid it because of, experience. The first thing that I would say is people often obsess over the idea itself instead of execution. I'll go back to my mantra, so to speak. Ideas are ubiquitous. Your perspective is not. Everyone has ideas, but especially right now where to come up with an idea, you could literally ask ChatGPT to give me $100 billion startup ideas, right? Your execution is the rare skill in this era. And, waiting for the perfect idea before even doing anything is a mistake that I see a lot of founders make. If I ask them, what are you working on right now? They might say, oh, I'm trying to come up with the perfect idea to execute this strategy or the perfect idea to get these users hooked. I think especially with startups that I've built myself, I've started to build a lot of promising projects just because I actually did something instead of seeing, hey, is this good or not? I mean, you could always change, right? But I think, getting it off the ground. Start small, build your MVP, iterate fast. You could always change it in the future, but just get yourself rolling. I think that's the first mistake that people make. Just do it, really. It's a Nike thing. 2, I think, kind of is a combination of this, is, losing motivation and, your dedication to something if it gets hard or when you don't see progress, right? Another aspect of burnout is doing things and then not seeing any results come from it, right? The easiest way to lose your motivation to do something is if you work 100 hours, 200 hours on something, you're really invested and you see you got 0 users, you got made 0 money, you weren't able to help anyone or impact anything. That's the easiest way to lose motivation. And to be fair, I'd be dejected too. But I mean, initial excitement is not really sustainable. And I think setting these small milestones, having pure accountability, celebrating these small progresses definitely helps, as we talked about before. I mean, momentum beats motivation every single time. So definitely being able to keep that in mind. So even when you're not making much progress, try to frame it in a way where you see yourself actually making towards goals that you're actually able to change instead of seeing, success come to you. And naturally, success will come to you if you do that. And lastly, I guess this is a 2-part thing, is not leveraging your perspective. I'm not going to repeat my mantra again because I'm afraid your users might get bored of it. But I think a lot of people that I've seen, especially high schoolers, they are taught to, see an example, try to copy the example, and seeing how well that works. Yes, it's the best way to learn something by literally copying exactly what someone did. And I encourage that when you're building your first project, it's easy to, see what what another startup founder did and, copy that exact formula. And it may or may not work for you. But I think the same ideas at this point in time are repeated so often that there's few distinct voices. What I tell everyone during my one-on-one sessions with founders is to always think, what do specifically I, bring to this problem? Think about, what do you do? Are you are you a musician? Do you play sports? Do you, for example, are you a big gamer? Does that action or hobby or perspective that you take, maybe you're a competitive, necklace maker or anything random that you might not think is relevant. Are you able to put that perspective into what you're doing? Because if so, then you have your, edge that you can sell yourself. And I think, yeah, those are the three main issues that I see young founders make.
I definitely agree. And referring back to your first common mistake, you talked about finding the perfect idea. So, what I think a lot of young entrepreneurs are told is to find that gap in the market and see what problem you could solve. So, do you also take that approach? And if so, how do you find the hole in the market?
Yeah. Um, this is a fun one, actually. I just talked about this yesterday with one of the startups I was working with. Uh, 80% of the time, let's say, when you're looking for a hole in the market, it doesn't exist. Uh, it's 2025. Startups, you have all these Stanford grads dropping out as soon as they see a problem and solving it with the startup. So finding a gap in the market right now for 85% of ideas just won't exist. So if you're going around chasing that gap in the market, you really are not going to find it for the most part. I mean, there's always exceptions to everything, but you really won't find it if you're chasing that gap. What people I motivate them to, consider is that if you're able to do the same thing as someone better than the person or people that are doing it, then that's your edge, right? You don't have to be the new scale AI, right? You don't have to be the next Microsoft or building something, completely different. Start with, doing something that people have already done before and, adding that one unique bit that makes it different. And that in and of itself, if it's strong edge that you offer, then you will succeed that way naturally. So you don't have to look for that, 20% case where there's actually nothing in the market that has done this before.
Thank you so much for sharing all this advice. It was perfect to interview you with Nova because a lot of our like my watchers, they want to start their businesses. So your Nova is like the perfect tool. And now for a bit of a more complicated question, I would say, what's one final piece of advice you would give to young entrepreneurs starting their journey?
One piece of advice. The one big lesson, especially for young founders, I think I would just say to start now, even if you're starting imperfectly. Your perspective matters more than you think. And either that be what you do, how old you are, where you're from, you're able to leverage that in some sort of way to create a difference, right? There's only one of you. And so you need to be able to do something now to be able to offer that side of you that the world doesn't have. And so I would say to not wait for the perfect plan or the perfect team or the perfect co-founders. Just focus on execution, iteration, and learning, and then surround yourself with people who are doing the same, such as at a accelerator program, either that be with Nova or with another group. Being able to build with like-minded people around you definitely will help strengthen that resolve, and to be able to start now, even imperfectly. And I think that's the one piece of advice I would give young founders right now.
Thank you so much for coming
And
on
thank you,
Spark
Esther.
Buddies.
It's been a pleasure.
Buddies